quietly, and I mean pretty quietly, Minnesota has won 8 games the last 2 years in the Big Ten. This is a team with PJ Fleck. Maybe they're starting to find their stride in the Big Ten and can be a surprise this year in 2026. There's a lot back here. There is a lot returning for the Golden Gophers going into this upcoming season. And I think maybe, just maybe, they could surprise some people in the Big Ten. Look, we're going to talk about Minnesota today. You're listening to the You Think You Know Sports podcast. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube. And I appreciate you listening. Hope you'll hit the subscribe button if you like what you hear. We're making our way across all of college football, all 138 teams, slowly but surely. We're working through the American and the Big Ten at the same time right this moment. We also have a website, youthinkyouKnowsports.com, spelled the same way as wherever you're listening to this podcast with U's instead of YOU. This started really with a TikTok page that has over 10,000 followers. I go live daily during the week, 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. Hope you'll find us on one of our social media outlets out there. TikTok is well established. The others just got started, so come hang out with us. Look, this Minnesota team is 66-44 under PJ Fleck. Row the boat, right? As he says. They've won 6+ games every year since 2021. They had a winning record last year in the Big Ten, which again, I think the casual fan may not realize. They certainly didn't show well against Ohio State. They didn't show well when they played Iowa, right? They didn't show well when they played Minnesota. But, they beat the teams that they should beat. They beat Rutgers, they beat Purdue, they beat Nebraska, they beat Wisconsin, right? So there were things that you like, but certainly they need to prove that they can be more competitive with the big boys when they get a chance. Well, what do you need to be competitive? You need a quarterback, right? Drake Lindsey was a freshman last year. He's back at quarterback. He completed 63% of his passes last year, had 18 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions. I think it was a little bit of an up and down year, but I think a pretty good year overall. I mean, listen, if your freshman quarterback has 6 interceptions, you'll take that, right? He was 68% passing in a clean pocket, 11 touchdowns, 5 picks. Under pressure, his completion percentage dropped to 44% with 7 touchdowns and an interception. So he actually threw a lot more interceptions when he wasn't pressured, which was interesting. Those are Pro Football Focus stats that I love to look at. He was 13 for 49 on deep balls last year. That's a 26.5% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Look, Minnesota averaged only 19 points per game last year, number 116 in the country, 277 yards per game, number 132. They passed on 55% of their plays, 21st most. And they ran on only 45%. That's 116th, right? So you can figure out a few things from that. One, you got to score around 30 if you're going to be really good and competitive in the Big Ten. It's amazing to win 8 games, scoring 19 points per game, and having under 300 yards per game. But they certainly did. And then they've got to be more balanced. I don't think there's any question about that. They have got to figure out how they are going to be more balanced in year 10 under PJ Fleck. So there are some pieces around him, right? So let's start talking about Drake Lindsey. Let's talk about some of the pieces that are surrounding him on offense. Javon Tracy, Jalen Smith are both back at receiver. Tracy had 37 catches, over 400 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. Smith had almost 30 catches. He had 28, 419 yards, 4 touchdowns. So you're looking at, if you morph those into one dude, over 60 catches and 10 touchdowns out of your receiving core. I think that's something you can certainly work with. You also have continuity there. Darius Taylor is back, 670 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns last year. He also caught 34 passes, right? So this is a guy that can help you out of the backfield. I think that's a big deal for Drake Lindsey in this offense. So, look, they've got to be better on offense. They certainly should be. Quarterback in a second year, you've got, again, guys around him that have played with him. I think that there's a lot to like if you're a Minnesota fan looking from the outside here. You also bring in Bennett Warren, an offensive tackle from Tennessee, who could be an impact player 3 offensive linemen return. Ashton Beers, Greg Johnson, Nathan Roy are all back for Minnesota this year as well. So offensively, should take a step. You should expect to be a little bit better. Now, how big of a step? That's the question. But I would think Minnesota is going to get somewhere in the mid-20s in points per game. They certainly should. Defensively, they've got some pieces, right? And it all starts with Anthony Smith, who may be a first-team All-American nationally when we're done with the season. He had 12.5 sacks, led the Big Ten last year. This is a guy who is on the short list of the best players in the Big Ten. He's on the short list of the best defensive pass rushers in the country, no matter where you look. He's going to be huge for this Minnesota team. They've also got Maverick Baranowski back at linebacker. He had 103 tackles last year. He led Minnesota. John Nestor is back in the defensive secondary with 6 interceptions. So there are 5 total defensive players back. Jackson Brown at linebacker, or Jackson Howard, is also back. And then Kerry Brown at defensive back are also returning. So there are pieces on this defense. They allowed just under 25 points per game last year and 356 yards per game. Both of those are in the top 60 nationally. You'd love to see a next step with Baranowski, Smith, and Nestor back. You would think that that's possible. So you could see Minnesota possibly being a little bit better on both sides of the ball with the returning players that they have. They have their first 3 games at home. Eastern Illinois on a Thursday, September 3rd. Then they have 9 days to prepare for Mississippi State to come in there. It'll be fun to see this SEC Big Ten matchup, maybe between 2 teams that aren't at the top of either one of those conferences standings at the end of 2026. I think we certainly would be surprised if either team was in the top 3 or 4 of these conferences. But still, to see the Bulldogs go up there and play the Gophers should be fun. Akron on September 19th ends that 3-game homestand at the beginning of the year. They go to Washington September 26th. Husky Stadium is a hard place to play, one of the hardest places to play over the last few years in college football. They come back home to play Michigan on October 3rd. I think that's the hardest stretch, right? You've got Washington and Michigan back-to-back. You've got to get through that somehow without it derailing your season. They go to Purdue October the 10th. They get a bye week before they host Iowa October 24th. They go to defending national champion Indiana on October 31st. Look, there's no better measuring stick in college football right now than playing Kurt Cignetti's program. So we'll see where Minnesota is at that point, right? We'll find out a lot from that game. They host UCLA November 7th. Then they play at Penn State November 14th, host Northwestern November 21st, and play at Wisconsin to end the year on November 28th. This is a team that does not play back-to-back road games, and I think that that's huge. Not having to play back-to-back road games is always something I look for and a team that I think can make the jump. The other thing I like is those West Coast games. They don't play USC, UCLA, or Oregon. Now, they do go to the West Coast to play Washington, but that is the one trip. Other than that, not a ton of travel for Minnesota this year, with only, 1, 2, 3, so 5 home games, 7 home games overall for this team. Should be a lot of fun to watch Minnesota. I think Lindsey could make the next step. I think that some of the guys they have back will help. I like having the offensive linemen back, 3 of them that started. I love having Smith on defense. I think this Minnesota team could be a team that could upset a few teams this year in the Big Ten. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Golden Gophers. Wherever you find me, whether you comment somehow on the podcast or you come find us on one of the other places you can watch my content where I've got videos up. We'll have a post up on my website, youthinkyouknowsports.com, soon on Minnesota as well. Love to hear your prediction for this Minnesota team and see what you think about the Gophers going into next season. Guys, I appreciate you listening to the You Think You Know Sports podcast. The next team we're going to get into on the podcast will be Nebraska, and then we'll get into Pat Fitzgerald's old team in Northwestern. We just got done doing a podcast about his new team, Michigan State, that was posted just before this Minnesota one. So those are the next teams as we continue in ABC order. We're not too far away from getting into Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, which come up very soon as well. So thanks for listening. Hope to see you on the next pod.